Chapter chair for this month, and he's kindly arranged for Michael to be here with us. But since Marsh couldn't be here with us, he did email me his introduction, so I will be reading that shortly. But I thought since I get to be in his stead, I also can do a little bit of an introduction. And if you know Michael, you know he's a modest person, so my goal is to embarrass him at least a little bit here. And start by saying Michael McDonough is one of those rare people in the community that almost goes without introduction. Because he's so involved, and has been so involved for so long. But having said that, if you have not yet heard about him, I'm going to at least say a few of the things, how I know Michael, and I know this is just a small segment of the thing he does. So let me start by saying I originally met Michael in the 1990s when we were both serving on the Better Bennington Corporation board. I served there for 6 or 7 years. Michael has served there much longer in probably almost every leadership role, even as interim director, and ultimately and currently as chair of the design committee for the BBC. Michael's a talented architect, he's a planner, he's a graphic artist, he's a coach, and he's a dedicated community supporter. His hand is apparent all throughout town as you look around. Everything from signage to streetscape design, even to our downtown graphical identity, all have been touched by the hands of Michael McDonough and his vision and ideas. This work continues to this day, and I love the train whistle. Thank you. His work continues to this day, and one of the things we're going to be hearing about in this presentation is his work on the River Walk. Well, actually, it's the River Walk grant application is that we're going to be hearing about today. And this is a project that they have been working on diligently for years. And I'm very excited that we'll be able to learn more about that. And with that, I am going to stop speaking with my voice. I am now channeling Marsh, and I'm reading his words. So, I'm now Marsh. A year ago, when Kelly Carroll's daughter was murdered in the Walloomsac walkway, members of the Interfaith Council went to work with Kelly, her family, residents of the Walloomsac Senior Housing Complex, the VFW, the Bank of Bennington, the Select Board, local legislators, and the Bennington Police Department to transform the walkway from a shady, dangerous location where drug sales, overdoses, and criminal behavior was regular, and aged neighbors were frightened to go out of their doors. Kelly's hope and dedication was to make good out of her daughter's death. In particular, we all hope to reclaim this walkway as a beautiful, safe asset that would draw people from outdoors and to our town. In the midst of that effort, we were excited to discover that the design committee of the Better Bennington Corporation, under Michael McDonough's leadership, has already been at work on the walkway. Michael shared the architectural renderings and plans for amazing transformation in January, and I, Marsh, wanted you community leaders to see his great work on behalf of our town. Please give Michael a warm Rotary welcome and discover the exciting possibilities before us. Thank you.
There's a tinge of irony here. I shared it with Jonah. One of the other times that I made an address, or whatever you want to call this, to Bennington Rotary up at the Paradise, that's bad weather. Yeah. The topic was rail trails. And I was part of a two-person debate in front of the group. There was an author there who had some national renown about the development of rail trails, the conversion of abandoned rail lines into pathways and trails. Now, quite contrary to public desire, I was there in the counter position of lobbying for our abandoned railroads and not wanting to see them totally disappear from our environment. And so we went back and forth and everybody listened, and it was really quite an interesting exercise. But part of that today is going to have a tangential piece of what I'm going to be talking about, which is the Walloomsac River Walk. I also want to thank Marsh and Michael for arranging this and having me here. because I really do get kind of excited when I'm talking about things Bennington. So, Marsh had mentioned the sadness about the Riverwalk. In our 2021 work plan, the design committee of the Better Bennington Corporation had included the Riverwalk in that work plan from the perspective of understanding that it had many strengths and many weaknesses. Some of those out of neglect, and I'm not suggesting that the town neglected its upkeep, but just neglect of use, neglect of appreciation. And so we thought that because the Riverwalk should be and is an incredible asset to downtown Bennington, which is our focus, that we should turn some attention to it. And so we began in the spring, and it was oddly eerie that it coincided with the events that really stirred interest on the part of a lot of people within the community about the Riverwalk. And so the first thing that we did was that first chance it got slightly warm enough last spring, we conducted a walkabout of the Riverwalk. And it was a visual site analysis. Some of the people that were already engaged in the issues of the Riverwalk joined us, and we walked from one end to the other and created a 5 or 6 page list of strengths and weaknesses. And there are certainly vast strengths in that resource. But there are also issues in terms of environment, condition, whatever you might want to think you'd identify in a walk around like that, that were also included in our assessment. And so we put the assessment on paper, and from that, because we didn't want it to just be a piece of paper back in the BDC offices, we began the process of a scoping analysis, which would take the identified strengths and weaknesses and work them into a plan that could form the basis of both short-term and long-term enhancements to the Riverwalk. And we spent most of the summer doing that with long sheets of old-fashioned tracing paper and markers over maps and drawing arrows and circles and anything that you can imagine in that kind of scoping analysis. And the really exciting thing so here's the third parallel of this process. The state of Vermont has a program through the Vermont Downtown Program, and I've served on the Vermont Downtown Board since its inception under Howard Dean. This particular program is called the Vermont Downtown Transportation Grants. And it's actually transportation money. It's not money that comes from the Vermont Downtown Program. But it's specifically intended to solve transportation problems within our designated downtowns. Just one brief thought. The designated downtowns are towns in the state of Vermont which the Vermont Downtown Board, by application from the downtown, has approved as being designated because it meets certain criteria to be designated. For example, one of the criteria is that the town applying for designation has to have a formal, organized organization that works on behalf of the downtown. And in Bennington, the Better Bennington Corporation is that so designated organization by the select board. The result of being designated is that the designated downtown is available for programs and grants, and private properties are available for tax credits through that designation. And so The confluence here is that the legislature was considering ways in which to boost downtowns with the amounts of money that states have available to them now. The transportation grant program usually had a pool of about $400,000 to put out to communities that applied for specific programs and projects. The legislature upped that $400,000 to $5 million, spread over 3 years. And suddenly, instead of communities applying for and not getting because there was not enough money to go around, the idea was that communities could apply and receive money for their valuable projects. And so we immediately, in conjunction with the town, talked about this year's round of downtown transportation fund grants as a target for the scoping work that we had worked on during the summer. Because one of the key things about applying for a grant is that you've got to have something to apply for. And it's got to be real and tangible, and we had that in our hand. And so we, in partnership with the town, and the town makes the application, we work together to put an application together. And I should say that this is not Bennington's first go-around with the Downtown Transportation Fund grants. The park at 336 was partially funded in this program. The upcoming improvements to Franklin Lane, which are going to be happening this summer, are also funded through that program as well. So we began to put together the application. And as I said, the basis of that was the scoping study. And so why don't we click to that. And this is the product of the original scoping study. So what it did was essentially take the route of the river walk, which happens to be along this river, and we took our analysis and we began to highlight opportunities for improvements, both, as I said, short-term and long-term. Now, I should give a little bit of history here, because you guys are part of the history. This is the original section of the river walk here, which runs from North Street to School Street, and it was constructed with federal monies under the leadership of Tom Bluto, when he was our first community development director. And that, the dedication plaque for that section of the river walk was dated 1980. And then in the 90s, the town took it upon itself to consider extensions of the river walk, because you'd like to have a river walk take you somewhere. And so the town then embarked on extension of the river walk between North and Depot Street and along to this area at the southerly edge of the existing municipal parking lot here by the Bennington Station Restaurant. And also a third section, which was termed the Bennell section, which runs from School Street to Park Street. And most of the funding for those, but that was kind of an in-house project. Most of the funding of that was done and provided by the town. I don't have documentation. This is all in my head, but I'm pretty sure I can be pretty sincere about it. The park, and if any of you were involved, that would be great to hear. The park, which is located at this end of the Riverwalk, the westerly end of the Riverwalk, my recollection is that that park space was developed with funds from Bennington Rotary. And so there's another really interesting reason to be here today talking about this, because you guys are that. So there's a lot of scribbles and things on here, but I want to mention just to give you a sense of how we arrived at where we did arrive at. There was obviously the issues on the Riverwalk. A major issue about the Riverwalk is that it has to cross streets. And so those four orange circles represent the places at which people on the Riverwalk become in conflict with motor vehicles. And so one of the scoping bits of analysis was that we have to do something to at least give the Riverwalk a fighting chance at Depot Street, North Street, School Street, and Park Street. So that was a programmatical goal, and we outlined ways in which that might be accomplished. That's a very relatively long-term aspect of this. We also thought that the Riverwalk needs more than just a path. And it could be and should be more than just a path to the community. And so, in specific fashion, we identified, and one of these things we can't take credit for, but we identified ways in which the Riverwalk could become place rather than just movement. And so, two places that we identified were in your park, and there is a group that is very committed and has the financial resources to consider a long awaited dream of many people in the community, and that is for a skate park, a skateboard park. And so we envision that as being part of the park space on the westerly end of the present Riverwalk. There is also some green space behind the Bank of Bennington, and we saw that as an opportunity for activity space, maybe for children and parents, whatever those activities might be. These are all scoping ideas, they're not designed ideas. And so we identified that in particular. Another thing that we identified was the value of the arts in the public landscape. And so one of the big negatives that we had in our scoping was the side of Walgreens. It's not Walgreens' fault, they just happen to be the occupier of that downtown strip mall right now. But we said, if we want people to enjoy the walk between North Street and Depot Street, let's give them something to enjoy. And so we've targeted that south wall of that building for a mural. And that's our first arts concept, but we also believe that there is a tremendous opportunity here for the arts community of Bennington, which I believe is one of our best kept, shouldn't be secrets. We have an outstanding arts reputation. We have an outstanding arts community, and we should be showcasing it in places like the Riverwalk. And so the last, aside from the nitty-gritty, like the lack of lighting on most of the Riverwalk, the only place that had lighting on it is the original section, was a desire, and this is where the synchronicity comes in, a desire to have a connection between the Riverwalk and what we've been casually terming as the Walloomsac Valley Rail Trail. And here's the rail trail connection, which has been in the planning stages for 20 years. And I think most of us probably know, but if you don't know, take a peek, is currently under construction, which will extend from River Street to the Hunt Street area. And if we're going to have a downtown Riverwalk, and it's a transportation piece, because that's what walkways are. They're people transportation, and bikes, I should add. So Deanne Monks was particularly interested in finding ways to connect the Riverwalk seamlessly with the rail trail as it moves north. Can you keep me abreast of drawing? I didn't even know the first slide yet.
Move along.
Yes, I know, exactly. I was born this way. So we spent a fair amount of time developing ways in which to make that connection. I won't go into the details, but there are 4 possible options that we identified in the scoping plan to get you naturally and seamlessly from here to there and to the north. And so when the opportunity for the enhanced downtown transportation grant came along, and it's really good money in that the maximum grant amount for each community that applies is $200,000. The match is reduced to 20% from 50%, which used to be the common match. So from a community standpoint, that's pretty cheap money. And so we went right to work on beginning to develop the ingredients that would go into that grant. Slide. You know, another way to do that is that you just move the slides, and I'll have to talk accordingly.
Sounds good.
So this is a blow-up of the westerly half of the current Riverwalk system, and you'll see that we discussed all of the kinds of enhancements and improvements and safety items that we felt could be incorporated into a long-range plan for the park. And these 2 slides, and might as well jump to the next one. These 2 slides, that next one.
This is the next one.
Oh, it is.
That was so fast, yeah?
Yeah, you were. Oh, my God. So, and you'll see here, for instance, there's that little area that we talked about for activities down in here, and enhanced entry from the back of the Walloomsac apartments. Those are just some of the details. And this kind of gave us our concrete list of items that we then culled for the downtown transportation grant. And here's the wonderful front page of the grant application. It was submitted March 7th. And it's fairly extensive in terms of narrative, but the biggest deal is budget. You've got to prove that you've got a real project that is budgeted, and you've got to show how you can accomplish it. And so, the first piece of that was to analyze and make our case for being a worthy project of a Riverwalk redevelopment. And you've got a larger slide. And so what we did was we highlighted in an area map fashion where the Riverwalk was, what we wanted to do with it, and all of the key things that are around it that make the Riverwalk a viable piece of the community fabric. And so this outlines the existing Riverwalk standing here, and then the new connector of the Riverwalk, which was decided to be placed on the west side of the existing parking lot, in part because of this being a really strong activity space with the skateboard park that we mentioned. And actually the people involved with the skateboard park said, we don't want to be on the dead end of the Riverwalk that is now going to go off in this direction or this direction. We want to be part of that connection. So this is how the Riverwalk is going to extend to the rail trail, which is here. So here are a couple of...
Was that too quick?
No. I did take a breath though, you notice. So these are some of the illustrations that we included in the application, which I want to highlight a couple of things here. One of the things that grew out of this process that I started talking about back in the spring was, and this is where the community steps in, the groups of citizens and organizations that had developed a new and strong interest in the Riverwalk. One of the things we identified, these are the original benches. And most of them you could only see about from here on up, because they don't sunk into the ground. And particularly around the Walloomsac apartments, the benches were kind of asking those of us who don't bend over so well anymore to sit down on a seat that was way down there. And they were in bad shape. And so Some of the citizens who were involved in the redevelopment from a perspective of making it a better place for the community, and the VFW stepped in conjunction with the town of Bennington, and these benches have all been refurbished. And if you are out and about or on North Street, just check out the fabulous restoration work that has been done on those original benches. And that's an example of the community stepping up without a grant and making that happen. The other things that are apparent here, the existing pathway is going to be removed and replaced with a 10-foot wide path to make it bike ped accessible. And one reason for that is we're connecting to the rail trail, and the rail trail is a bike ped path. And so we're going to extend that bike ped specification all the way through. The present river walk ranges from 6 to 8 feet in width. Some places it's even down to 5 feet. So it will all be new paved 10-foot wide pathway. And in this particular section of the river walk, this is the one section that had lighting on it. But the lighting was subject to a lot of vandalism originally, and we budgeted to replace the fixtures on the existing lamp poles with new LED light fixtures. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. I want to mention in this particular photo, and in all of these photos, because obviously I picked out the photos, I kind of want the Vermont Downtown program to see what a beautiful community we have. Now, the downtown program knows that, but I never miss the opportunity to sort of advertise the fact. This view of the old St. Francis Academy and that space is just really wonderful to me. And here's a couple of other photos. This is going to be a little bit hard to see. This is the North Street Bridge. Another part of that historic fabric, the grist mill is right over there. You can't take a bad picture on the Riverwalk, really. Except maybe the Walgreens. No offense to Walgreens. But the other kinds of things we're going to do with the grant is that we're going to enhance each of these entranceways. This is a sign that would stylistically point you in this direction down the Riverwalk, and we'll say Walloomsac River Walk on it, and bring some graphic identity to it all. And that means we're getting very close. And then the last thing I'll mention here is and the town actually put up the money for this and became part of the grant, matching monies. The town intended to light the Bennington section, which is the darkest sort of, I hate to use the word scary, section of the Riverwalk. So that is going to be included in the program as well. And then we have questions. Yes?
So after these improvements are made, are there any plans to, one, kind of advertise the Riverwalk on like Bennington begins here, or Vermont begins here, to really make it an attraction? And two, I don't know, once you extend the pathway 10 feet, but you could have, like craft markets, food stands along there, right? Would that still be possible? Do you have power along there?
Yes, every one of those lampposts has power. So,
I mean, like that you could plug into?
Yeah, well, they can be modified to have outlets.
Right.
But so, yes, that's part of the activity component of the original scoping study, was that to have things happening there. And some of the groups, including the Interfaith Council, have also already been doing activities there, and there's an opportunity to see more of it. We want the Riverwalk to be one of those things on the list when people are saying, why would I want to go over to Bennington for the day? Well, we want the Riverwalk to be one of those things. Yes?
Just a question, so I love what you're doing, but like in the evening, will there be any kind of police presence or something just to up the safety level after dark?
The Bennington Police Department has been involved in all of the conversations that have taken place amongst the community groups and the Interfaith Council. There's been strong recognition on the part of the police department, expressed strong recognition, that they want to help to make this a safe, comfortable place. In addition to that, the Bank of Bennington installed a new camera system in the back of the bank, and they redirected it so that it provides some coverage of the Riverwalk. So there's potential for video coverage there as well. And the process of making the space more comfortable for the residents of the Walloomsac apartments. I've always believed, although it's hard to make happen, activity balances against bad activity. Good activity balances out bad activity. And if we can make the Riverwalk that kind of enhanced place, we think that will go a long way to addressing that as well. The additional lighting will certainly do that, especially in the Bennington section.
I was going to mention, NSK was really involved, and they donated the red maple trees. I think it's 27 of them at the very beginning.
Yes.
I was with you in the van. We came back to Yoshi's with the president of NSK. Went by the airport, and they had an old TC3 with a World War II team. We thought that was the end of everything. And it turned out he was very happy that we recognized, and that was one of the first donations the first owner of NSK did to Bennington.
MSK is very interested in this whole
Yes.
process, very committed to it. Great.
How far north does that go?
To the Hunt Street area, and
That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, where is that?
To Molly Stark School, to Orchard Street, to Molly Stark School, and then past that to MLA, which is across
Oh,
the
okay.
circle
All right.
at Walmart. So we're talking all, this connects Northside Drive to downtown Bennington.
Yeah, that
for the
makes
first
sense.
time.
the other piece of that is the Ninja Trail.
Right.
I've been begging for a new name for a long time, but it'll grow out of that Ninja Trail thing. That's where you can pick up the Ninja Trail off the street.
By McDonough's.
Yes, and out behind Walmart. And the Ninja Trail starts there and brings you to the entrance to Bennington College. So we have the burgeoning pathway from downtown Bennington to Bennington College, which is pretty good stuff.
Section by section is how Burlington did it. So.
That's right, yes. Oh, and I should mention, sorry, what time is it?
We're time.
Yeah, okay. Back on one of the other slides. This also ties into plans that are being worked on through Bennington County Regional Commission to extend a pathway from Bennington to Berkshire County and Williamstown on the old trolley tracks that ran between Bennington and Williamstown. And that's in the planning stages. Remember I said the rail trail took 20 years? So, that's probably in the 20-year time frame as well. But one of the things that we've advertised here as part of our grant application is that we envision the Riverwalk extending east across the old Energizer property and coming out on East Main Street where the river is crossed by East Main Street. And that's the target point for the beginning of the new track path from there to Williamstown. So it all really comes together in a very strong way. We highlighted the fact that though we've lost a major industry, that major industry has been studied and analyzed and is on the market and will likely, we hope has the potential of being a major redevelopment, which would be along the pathway and part of that. And we have the proposal for mixed-use commercial activity and housing on Depot Street, which is also immediately adjacent to the Riverwalk. So not only are we bringing people to downtown with an enhanced Riverwalk, we're giving new people who are now living downtown access to that Riverwalk as well.
Thank you.
Thank you,